F6 online support program, class 9, week 10, lesson 8, subject biology. Textbook biology, page number from 111 to 112, unit 6, enzymes, topic mechanism of enzyme action. Objectives. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to revise mechanism of enzyme action, lock and key model, induced fit model. Mechanism of enzyme action. What does mechanism of enzyme action means? It means when the enzymes and substrate are reacting with one another and they are forming the product at the end. So this is the mechanism of enzyme action. How they bind to one another. As you all know, enzymes are having its active site to which the substrate will bind itself. So when enzyme attaches with the substrate, a temporary enzyme substrate complex is formed. Right? Now why the temporary enzyme substrate complex is formed? Because when the product is formed, so the enzymes has to be separated from the product. So enzyme only catalyzed the reaction. Enzyme only help in the catalysis of the reaction when the product is formed, so the enzyme has to remove itself from the product. And the substrate that has been attached to the enzyme, actually that substrate is converted into the product. After that, you can see in the diagram that when enzyme and substrate are reacting with one another, after the reaction, the enzymes and the product are released from one another. The product that is formed, actually that was the substrate which was bind to the enzyme. When the reaction was carried out, so the product was separated from the enzyme. Now we will be discussing some models that were introduced by some of the scientists. So the first model is the lock and the key model, as its name indicates that it is the model that is based on the lock and the key. You can see that every lock has its specific key. Not every lock can be opened with any kind of a key. As you can see that the key has been specifically made for that specific lock. So this model is actually based on the lock and the key. So if you look towards the discovery, so a German chemist Emil Fischer in 1894 proposed lock and key model. What this model actually say? According to this model, both enzyme and substrate possesses specific shapes that fit exactly into one another. As I have already told you that this model is actually based on the lock and the key. You can see the lock and the key that they are very much specific for one another. So same is the case with the enzyme. Enzyme is very much specific in its nature and only specific substrate can act on that enzyme or can bind itself to that enzyme. Both are having the specific shapes and they are having a kind of a shape that they can easily fit into one another, just like key and lock. So this model actually explains the specificity of the enzyme. What does the specificity mean? That not every substrate can be attached to every enzyme, but enzymes are very much specific in nature. You can see this diagram that we are having a key and a lock, and this key and lock can be fixed into one another and they are forming lock and key complex. On the next you can see a diagram that we are having an enzyme with a specific shape and a substrate with a kind of a shape that it can easily fit into the enzyme. So it will be formed enzyme substrate complex. When enzyme substrate complex is formed, so at the end when the product is formed from this substrate, so the enzyme will be separated from this product. Come towards the second model, that is the induced fit model. So just look at the discovery. In 1858, an American biologist, Daniel Koshland, suggested a modification to lock and key model and proposed induced fit model. This model is a little bit different from the lock and key model, as in this model Daniel Koshland tell us that enzymes are actually enzymes are having the active site, and those active sites are not rigid. They are not rigid. They can be molded into any shape. If a substrate binds to that enzyme, so it will acquire the shape of that substrate. So according to this model, active site is not a rigid structure, rather it is molded into the required shape to perform its function, and this model was more acceptable as compared to the lock and the key model. So this was your today's lecture. Hope you find it easy. Thank you.